on June 19th, 2018. This will be a committee meeting of the whole board. First item on the agenda, introductions and administrative remarks. Dr. McQuiggan.
Thank you very much. We have a very full agenda tonight. I'm going to start off by answering a few of our questions from last month, and then we'll talk a little bit about what to expect tonight and in the upcoming sessions. We had a couple questions from our May 8th meeting. A few questions were posed about football equipment and concussions, and it's our understanding that those were answered by the presentation we had in place at that meeting. There was a question about some of the survey responses from the sleep study. Specifically, some of them were about a question of response was grouped as some or to a great extent, meaning that two responding groups were combined. And the question was how many students had responded to each one of those responses, a breakout of the subdata. So that is going to be available in the published report from the sleep study later on this summer. There was a question about whether or not the teachers at Radnor High School follow the homework policy, and I think we've had this question before, but yes, certainly all of our teachers follow board policies, and if there are concerns around instructional issues, particularly homework or whatnot, concerned parties should always start with the classroom teacher and move on to the building administration if the concern isn't resolved. We had another question similar around the sleep study. 50% of the students reported napping on the study, and could we get some additional information about where they were napping or the conditions of the napping. We did not solicit that type of detail in the survey, so that information is not going to be available in the report. All right. Just a reminder that we do not have a curriculum committee meeting in July, but as you're looking forward to August, we're going to be doing our full day kindergarten report, and we're also going to be talking about the Future Ready Index and what we can expect to see as a district with the Future Ready Index in August. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. We ask presenters to please abide by board policy and limit your comments to no more than 4 minutes. Is there any public comment at this time?
Governor's Circle. Still leftover questions about football that I did not feel were answered, which is why is it not better to eliminate tackling altogether in the middle school? And it was stated that at that meeting that there was concern about concussions and increasing rates in other sports. Whether or not helmets should be used in other sports. Will you keep records on concussions and sub-concussions for all sports in the future? Number 4, the minutes refer to a video to hear details of the athletic director's report on concussion prevention. How long are these videos posted, and how long are they easily available to the public? Number 5, is there any way to increase the efficiency of conducting studies like the adolescent sleep start time study so that recommendations can be implemented in a timely manner? There appears to be overwhelming agreement, and yet the study drags on and on. By the same token, when will the recommendations and action plans be implemented for the middle school? And my final question is Mandarin Chinese running next year? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. Is there any other public comment?
My name is Stacy Mandel. I'm at 727 Clyde Circle in Bryn Mawr. And I have 2 children who are in the district, in the middle school and in the elementary school. I myself have been a public school teacher and a professional coach of teachers for a combined 17 years. I've taught on the West Coast, I've taught on the East Coast, private, public, suburban, and urban. My coaching experience was in Philadelphia and Camden in the most at-risk schools in our country, working with very resistant teachers and also school leaders. I'm here because I now teach mindfulness to kids, to youth. And as I've been exploring the possibility of mindfulness skills instruction in this district, it's come across, I've noticed that there has been a history of some mindfulness in this district. And then I feel like there are perhaps some misunderstandings or misconceptions about what mindfulness skills instruction is. And so I'm just here to try to see if I can help in any way to shed more light on what the benefits are, what the science is, what the research is. I feel very passionately about exploring this because of my work with children for so long, because of my own parenting experience, because of my own journey with mindfulness and what it's brought for me and what I did not get and what I think I needed as a child. And so I brought with me an invitation to a community forum that I'm facilitating at the Ludington Library this June and July, and I wanted to just offer it to see if anyone from the district is interested in attending. And if not, I'd be happy to meet privately with anyone. There are other districts in our area that are implementing mindfulness skills instruction in the curriculum. So Lower Merion Schools, it's on their task force actually. In their strategic plan for research and development, they're leaning into how to do systemic inclusion of it. District-wise, Great Valley School District also, in 2016 and 17, they introduced it in the fall and winter to their high school. Did parent and community workshops. I'm interested in bringing it to kids at any age possible, whatever is appropriate for the setting. I particularly believe that it's worthwhile to give it to kids as young as possible, because then it just sets the foundation and they're busy living their lives now, so why wait? Why not offer it to them immediately? So anyway, I brought these invitations. I guess I can give them to you or whatever's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment?
This comment is from Liz Duffy. At first glance of RMS report, I feel it captures my experience at RMS. Glad to see we are addressing inconsistencies in experience/rigor between teams. The need to engage and challenge every student, not just those at accelerated levels, is important and one that I personally think administration should be targeting. I was surprised not to see anything about the foreign language curriculum. I believe this is another area in our district that could be strengthened, including looking at starting earlier in elementary. Thanks for your attention and for allocating the resources to conduct the study.
Thank you.
Good evening. I was curious to read about the Active Learning Center student survey that's up and coming, and it looks like an interesting grant that's been received. My question was, is this grant will there be any additional cost by the school district, or will the $30,000 cover? And I also was curious, in the survey that's being given to the students, if in any way you might think that a student would welcome wanting to be involved in a brand new classroom setting in a active learning center, whether or not they might work with their answers to this survey, so that when it's reviewed, the teachers will be very circumspect in the way that they choose the students for this class. But looking forward to it, a little further explanation of exactly what a flexible classroom is. I would welcome that. On the new textbooks, besides the fact that getting more expensive, the question again, are any of these available as e-books? And the one question I had on one of them, looks like there's a license involved, a 6-year license on the, one of the sports and entertainment marketing. Does that mean that that's a license for an e-book? I was just curious on that because it didn't seem to say that. and I'm looking forward to, once again, a discussion on the Radnor Middle School program review findings. It's been ongoing for quite a while. Was very interested to finding number 4 under organizational structure and processes. The comment of the stakeholder groups' interest in fewer and longer blocks of times for learning. And once again, an obvious answer, I think, to these findings. Standardized testing significantly interrupts instructional time. That's something we've been hearing for quite a while. I think that's just a confirmation. It was interesting to see it. But my question is on the future timeline. The concern I had is that the recommendations and action plans won't be shared until September. By then, the new school year has started. Will all of this work and the findings of this new curriculum be implemented in the new school year in September, since the plans and actions won't be announced until that time?
Thank you, Ms. Bertle. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, that brings us to the approval of minutes from our last meeting, which was also a full board. Does anyone have any comments about the meeting minutes? Seeing none, they will stand as read, and that brings us to the board action items. Dr. McQuagan?
Okay, so we have a long list here. So as you saw on your agenda, we have 12 very generous donations from the Radner Education Foundation and also from 2 of our PTOs. Rather than my going through each of them, does anyone have any specific questions about any of them? A lot of them are repeats.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Rather than go through them all. I just had a couple of clarification questions. There's one, it's the 4th item down, Radnor Middle School Girls Lead.
So it's a mentoring program. It's an outside agency that comes to us actually years ago, and Ms. Purnell can give us more detail on this. They used to do it for either low cost or for free. Their funding has been stripped away over the past few years, and in an effort to continue it, we've sought some outside funding. So Radner Education Foundation has been making a contribution to them so that they can continue to host it at the middle school.
Okay.
So it's a girls mentoring program.
Great, thank you.
So it's the first 9 that are the REF grants, is that it?
Yes, and then the next 2 come from the PTOs. Exactly. So the middle school books.
No, actually 3. Well, 2 different ones from Wayne. EdTurn, is that, what is the?
That's the EdTurn program at the high school where they mentor the students. I think Ms. Ruby's usually the one who's involved with that.
Yep, thanks.
Anything else? Anybody else?
Are we gonna talk about the textbooks separately?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yes.
making sure.
Yes. Okay. So the next one is our overnight trip that we do each year to Sandy Hill for September. So this is their approval so that they're all ready to go in September. Are there any questions about Sandy Hill?
It's not so much about Sandy Hill, but I'm just, and don't feel like you have to answer this tonight, but I just am curious now that we've been a year or 2 into the enhanced, we did a big push a couple of years ago when the volunteer clearances required the background checks and the fingerprints, and we did a whole bunch of people, and we had the company come from Fort Washington and do the fingerprints checks here for volunteers. And so this is not a question for you to answer tonight, but I'm just kind of curious, will we periodically maybe do a revamp, not a revamp, but a refresh of the offering widespread assistance with the clearances here to facilitate our volunteers? This is a big one that I know, I don't actually think parents go to that one,
No,
but as
they
far as,
don't. It's not a big
I know that parents don't actually go to this one, but it was sparking my brain about trips in general and volunteer clearances and all that stuff. So, it, you know, as I said, please don't answer tonight. I don't even know that it's for you to answer, but it did spark my brain about how is that all moving smoothly, and, you know, will we be offering another opportunity for parents to come in and do that in a way that is facilitated and
there is
as user-friendly as
information to share
possible.
about that. But yes, I will put it on one of the agendas.
No, don't put it on it. It's more of a,
Information.
it's more just informational. Yeah, if you could just follow back up with us. How's that going?
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Right, and then the last one is the student survey proposal. So we talked about this active classroom last year when Radner Education Foundation, or I guess it was earlier this year, committed $30,000 to 2 teachers at the high school. They since have been working with a couple different vendors with different types of furniture to outfit for them, which is an integrated classroom. So it's a larger classroom with more students and obviously in need of more furniture. So they landed on Steelcase as the selected company, and they have an opportunity to get some extra services from Steelcase in planning and assessing the effectiveness of the classroom by having their students participate in a survey. And according to our policy, if our students, even if it's anonymous, if they participate in a survey with an outside agency, if the information goes to a third party, it has to be approved by the board. So they're very interested in working with Steelcase. This is the 3rd company they've looked at, and this is the one they'd like to choose, and they would like to take part in this extra added piece and get this extra support and ask their students to take, I think it's a 13-question survey. They would take it online in class as part of their integrated program.
So do you want to share a bit more about what this flexible classroom might look like for people?
Okay, so if you look around at some districts that are building newer schools or even some charter schools and whatnot, and offices, a lot of different offices have gone to more flexible seating, flexible work environments where a lot of the furniture is mobile, where a lot of it really lends itself to the use of technology. There's easy ways to plug in, there's easy places to set your devices, there's opportunities for you to configure and reconfigure either the work environment or the school environment. So that's what we would be thinking about with the flexible furniture. So they're looking at desks that have wheels on them, and the desk that comes across the front flips down so that you can make clusters of 4, some high-top tables, some movable whiteboards, so that they can have students working in different learning centers throughout the day.
So does it have desks that you can lower so you can sit at it, or raise them you can stand at it?
Sometimes there's some of the stand-up desks, sometimes the workstations are higher. They've looked at a couple different configurations. So even now, if you go into the school library, or I was in the YMCA last night, they have high-tech tables where kids are doing homework, and they have comfortable seating where people are sitting in circles having conversations. So the idea would be that the classroom wouldn't just be static rows, and then to jazz it up, we put those desks in a circle. They would have opportunities to quickly get in pairs or groups of 4, or connect with each other based on a topic they're studying or an area of interest. So, and that's where the whole idea of the flexibility comes in. And it's a great picture. Is that from Steelcase or from Corbett?
Steelcase, yeah.
They have some nice stuff. Actually, 2 of our libraries are both looking at information stuff from Steelcase as well, in an attempt to update some of the libraries.
So do we have to subject our students to marketing to get this?
No, the only marketing is the survey, and the teachers, based on the REF grant, they were already intending to do something to measure the effectiveness, because you do have to do a report with REF after you're finished saying, how did it go, did it have the intended impact? So this would actually give them some kind of hard and fast data that they could use to actually describe what the students were seeing as the impact on the instructional environment.
And Maureen, I read through the survey. I don't really have a problem with it. I think some of it is a little hard to say it belongs, it's attributable specifically to the furniture, but that's their marketing team, I'm sure. I guess so, which led me to my question, which was, I understand it's anonymous among the students. Is Steelcase going to market this and say 75% of students at Radnor High School said this furniture helps them learn better?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be attributed to us as a district?
So anonymous as an organization, I can confirm that with them. No, I don't have it.
Okay, I would like to know it's not necessarily an endorsement by the district.
Yeah.
They're not attributed, we're not the commenters.
Good thought.
So, I don't know how you go do questions on your committee. Do the parents have to give permission for the students to participate in the survey?
Typically, no. We haven't.
Okay.
We haven't asked parents to give permission. Okay. Like when we did the one for the sports, the athletes.
Yeah, no, I just seeing this. It's on the first question says I agree to participate, and I didn't know if it was something that we have to first get permission from parents.
It's always good to do some type of at least a passive permission.
I don't remember what our policy says about that. That's more that. I will say one of the things I liked about this survey is that sometimes our own surveys are kind of an all or nothing. Actually, one of the things I liked about this particular survey is it gives a little bit of a, well, sometimes, or neither agree somewhat or strong. I mean, it's not, I like, as surveys go, not necessarily the questions, and I hear what you're saying, Sarah, about some of the outcomes are not gonna necessarily, whatever, it's their thing. But just as a survey, as surveys go, I like how they have some of their qualifiers, I guess is what I was gonna say. But I would be curious if, is it going to be the parents have to give permission? And I really like your question, Sarah, about if our identifier as Radnor School District will be, able to be used by Steelcase.
Maybe not a question, but we expect that this is not attributed to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Do it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So, is there a longer term game plan for this, if it works well in this classroom? Is there some kind of
I think the longer term plan is to have sort of these pilot environments or these kind of sample classrooms. We have a small classroom in our EL classroom at the middle school where we use some grant money to put some furniture in place there. So we have some other classes that are using that as well. I think it's a math class that goes in there, and we'll do the same thing with the integrated classroom. Mr. Bechtold and Mrs. Kepkes will schedule it in a way that other classes will be able to, cycle through it and use it as well. So before we would, spread it far and wide, we would certainly need to have a game plan because, when I first started, saw people asking stand-up desks here and this, you do run the risk that people get lots of different grants and will end up looking like a big garage sale. Because, when you plan a building and you buy furniture and fixtures, there's usually coordination and whatnot. So that would be really important. So I don't see it moving beyond one classroom in any of our buildings without having some kind of a game plan.
I just, in researching this company a little bit, they do offer active learning center grants. So in terms of funding going forward, apparently they give that out to all different educational institutions too.
I think that brings us to the Radnor Middle School Program Evaluation.
We have to do our textbook adoption.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're going to keep moving. All right. So how about if we start with Spanish? Mr. Blueprint, you want to start with Spanish first, because we have multiple books for Spanish, and then we'll move down the list.
Testing. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. So I have with us Senora Alfonso, which is the Radnor High School Department Chair for World Languages, and also Senora Bosma, which is our middle school Spanish teacher, so they can help build some of the questions.
So everyone's already had the textbook adoption form, so if you just want to talk a little bit about your the two books, or you have three books, right, that you're highlighting tonight, and then
Can you start those around while you do
yes.
this?
Folks have any questions, we can follow up with that. Thank you.
We'll start with you.
Which is the same as high school. So we have we collectively reviewed several different textbooks beginning this school year. And the first one we're going to talk about is Senderos. It's by I believe, which is importantly a language-only publisher. We like this book for a variety of reasons. One of the major ones is that it has a 6-step instructional design which aligns with the AP standards. So from the very beginning of middle school Spanish, all the way through, there would be the same set of standards for vertical teaming across teachers. Those 6 steps include context and making it personal, vocabulary, putting it into words, media, bridging experiences, culture, giving new perspectives, structure, using grammar as a tool, and synthesis, putting it all together. Another important aspect is that there are monthly news and cultural updates. It has a 2-tiered technology approach for districts that have significant technology and those who do not. So at the middle school, in our language department, we have less access on a daily basis, classroom technology than the high school does. So we might be able to modify within that. Another couple of important aspects are that it has scaffolding with instructional overlays. Students have speed control, they can do voice backs, there's video virtual chat activities, and there are heritage speaker activities too, which is important because we do allow students who are native speakers into the classroom as early as middle school. So there's going to be an opportunity for differentiation within the classroom.
Also very important that it connects the students to the real world, especially nowadays with the language being alive. It needs to be more authentic and more real to the current things. So with the updates, the students are more connected to the current things that are going on. I really like that very much. This textbook, by the way, it's the same textbook from the middle school. The only difference is that the middle school is divided into 1A and 1B, and because they have it for 7th grade and 8th grade. And in the high school, then it's just level 1, which is the same, but it's the same program. So the students will come with the same program. It's not like we're having 2 different programs. Just clarification.
Yes.
So some of the documents you may have in front of you that were on the side table as you entered just has the different costs associated with the books. And do know that all 3 have online access as well. So a typical classroom would have a physical hard copy in the room, and then students would have access on a device or at home or anywhere really. So as you're looking into the cost, they do involve the online access. So Senderos 1 is, I think, the first page of your document. You can see the cost. The student editions are $115, and also the workbooks in which they do the activities in the classroom. So $115 and $145. And then again, 4 teacher editions, which will cover the various teachers teaching the Senderos Spanish 1.
Should we be testing this as well?
That's Spanish 2.
Oh,
All the books are also going to be available up in the superintendent's office through the board meeting, so if you're interested in looking at them more closely afterwards, you're welcome to do that.
so we approved Spanish books last year. So can you just talk about how this dovetails with that?
Yeah. This program basically is for Spanish 1, which really is a program that was for levels 1, 2, and 3. It was the last time that we had a new textbook was 10 years ago. Usually, from what I understanding, is every 7 years to 8 years we can adopt a new textbook, but this textbook we've had for over 10 years. So the vocabulary is very outdated. We still have the words like CD players and cassette players and stuff like that. And that's why we were talking about, the realia is is different, and also the content will be a little bit more updated and aligned to the standards. The textbooks you're talking about were for levels 4 and 5, so those were not.
But is it a similar series?
Yeah,
Does it?
So this level 1, 2, 3 is a different series. And the ones that for the 2 honors that we're also submitting for adoption would be aligned with the series that is already established for the 3 honors and the 4 and the AP. So there's 2 different programs because they're 2 different curriculums.
I think it's important to note that in the past several years, the AP standards have themselves changed. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we're in alignment with those standards from the very beginning. So in the middle school, for example, the students that will leave us will go on 2 different tracks, hopefully continuing the language. One will go to the honors track, and the other path being the advanced track. And previously, the emphasis that we had was not specifically aligned with the AP exam as well as it is this one is now.
Can I ask a question? What does senderos mean? I don't speak Spanish.
Pathways.
Thank you.
Any other
questions?
I actually do. Did I hear you say that there's a voice thing, a voice component? So could a student conceivably, you know, be reading text and then speak it and get feedback on whether or not they're using the correct accent or intonation or whatever?
Yeah, yes. So I think one of the really
Which is really
interesting
important.
things, yeah. So we haven't had, we're hoping to get in a publisher to learn all the ins and outs of it, but I did significant research on this, and one of the really interesting things is that a lot of us are doing these things individually in the classroom, but it takes a lot of work. So for example, my cell phone and my Apple Watch both have a voice texting recognition, and I text in Spanish. If it works, I've done a good job. If it doesn't work, I need to go back and redo the words. So we do a lot of these things when we have opportunity to do them in the real world, and this provides us with that. And also gives us things like the monthly news and cultural updates. We're always finding them on our own. But this is like a one-stop shop for all the things that we might need in the classroom.
So, maybe I don't need to know the answer to this, but you're going with Senderos 1, but then you're switching to a different book for Spanish 2 honors. So there must be a reason that Auténticos 2 is better than Senderos 2?
Yes, not necessarily that it's necessarily better, but it's aligned more with the program that we already have established for the 3 honors, 4 honors. So they will be aligned. They will not be, so the kids would have the vocabulary that will carry them to the 3 honors. So there's more of a bridge, because the honors track is totally different than the advanced.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I had a bunch of questions. So actually, and I appreciate your presentation because it was helpful. You answered a bunch of the questions I had scribbled all over here. So you're students in the middle school will take 1A presumably in 7th grade and 1B in 8th grade?
Close.
Right.
And that was something we had to work out. So it will be very similar to what we have going on right now. Because 7th grade is every other day. Essentially what you're doing is you're not completing half of basic Spanish 1, you're completing a third of a course. So most likely we would get through the majority of 1A, and then we have a couple of chapters, and then a 1A that would start in 8th grade and then finish up with 1B in 8th grade because of the different pacing. Ideally, if 7th grade was every single day and 8th grade was every single day, you would divide the course into 2, and it would be very easy to do that way.
Are you guys logistically handling the fact though that they're going to be there are going to be textbooks overlapping 7th and 8th graders?
We are. Well, what happens is that the students are going to have actually each teacher will have their own copies in the classroom. So the students share the copies there, and it's exactly the same setup as we currently have. So we worked with the same model for a while.
Okay, and then the students aren't going to take the books with them at home. They would be using the electronic version.
Exactly.
Okay, and then just so everybody kind of understands how this flows, when they get to high school in 9th grade, are they automatically going to repeat Senderos 1, or is that for students who haven't taken Spanish before? And if you're not in Senderos, then you're starting a whole new curriculum and moving to Auténticos.
So what would happen is that the students in the high school would go to Spanish 2 honors, which would be the other textbook track, or they would use Senderos 2 to go on to Spanish 2. So Senderos 1 is for the first year students who begin Spanish at the high school.
Okay.
And it's a little bit of a faster pace. It's set up for a 1-year program, whereas a 1A and a 1B program are set up to just stretch it a little bit longer. That's more appropriate for a post-school level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senderos 2 isn't on here though.
Because that would be our next year textbook adoption.
Okay.
And then Senderos 2 would be then for levels 2 and 3. We would spread it out between 2 and 3. Because Senderos 1, again, we will probably almost finish, and then there's a little bridge that we do like a catch-up in level 2, but that will be for 2019.
Okay.
2020. And then we would have to do the same process next year for level 2 for Senderos 2. But Senderos 2 will then be spread out for levels 2 and 3 advanced.
Okay. Last question. Because the description of each of the three was pretty much the same, so then I got a little confused. So we're moving to Senderos because it has more of an AP structure and focus. Does the Auténtico also have an AP focus? So we're switching, if they go into the advanced placement track, they're switching to the Auténtico program, but it's not, they're not switching out of the AP track. Or that structure. It's just a different approach. It's just a different culture. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, and we'd like to call Mr. McBride up next to do the checklist.
Thank you very much.
You want this back? Is this yours? Yeah.
I'm going to see, I'm a visual learner. I wanted this.
Hi, good evening.
Know it well.
Tonight we will be proposing a resource for our multivariable calculus course. The course has not run in the last couple of years, so we're really excited now that this will be a course that's running. And I will let Mr. McBride explain a little bit about the research that we did on this resource.
So we looked through 3 books that are very popular textbooks for multivariable calculus. Generally, as you're seeing a very thick book passed around, all 3 calculus courses tend to be placed in one book. But you can also get just the multivariable calculus book by itself. And we don't have copies of the big thick book with all 3 courses in them for the students. We did look and decided that we did like the Stewart book. I actually used Stewart's A, B, and BC text for extra problems, rigor. He has a really good rigor, makes the kids connect the topics better than any other author, and that's why we went with it. Another reason, we are still in negotiations with the University of Pittsburgh, trying to convince them to give credit for this course along with the linear algebra, and hopefully one of these days we will have pushed long enough that they'll give in and give us their credit for that as well. But we're hoping that it is also the textbook that Villanova and the University of Pittsburgh use for their course.
So wait, you said you're buying the big one or just the small one?
The small one.
You're just buying that?
Yes.
And because you're covering Calc A, AP, Calc B, and C, I mean A and B, and
Right.
this is C.
This is C.
Right. We already do.
We do A, B, and C. This is multivariable, so it's the
Next one after
next
that.
level.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm super happy about this, and I really hope that you're successful. That linear algebra coach, I forget what we called it, but that program with Pitt, the dual enrollment, right, has worked out really well. And,
Our
and
kids are
hopefully,
scoring well, and we're hoping that's going to bolster. They're looking at us.
Right.
The kids are all getting A's, and the worst
everything,
rate is
they're doing really well.
Yeah.
So thank you for pursuing this. I really appreciate it. I know it's making a difference for kids. So thanks.
So to send your old photocopies of stuff?
Oh, we don't photocopy.
That's a different class. That's not this
really,
class.
Because I know for a long time, we've talked about this, we've joked about buying the rights to the textbooks from whoever it was, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So, yeah, I know. I mean, literally, that looks through that street to me.
Do you have 20, I'm sorry, do you have 20?
So, yeah, but this is what you want to go with, you're comfortable with this?
Yes. Yeah, I really like his work.
Do you have 20 students signed up for next year? I mean, it says that you're looking to purchase 20 books.
We have 15 right now signed up, and there's several who have not yet signed up.
That's great.
That could switch into the course.
Super, that's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.
Okay. So we'll go right into the sports and entertainment marketing since
Hello, everybody. Here to present the Sports and Entertainment Marketing textbook. This course has been in our program of studies for 2 years now. It did not run the first year as we did not have enough students. However, this year we have 21 students signed up, so we're very excited that it's running. I think it's a great course and provides a lot of opportunities to our students that they wouldn't have otherwise. Chris Monahan could not be here tonight. However, he did most of the research on the textbook. This is the brand new edition. It is from 2016. It's the 4th edition of the text. It is digital, so we'll be going through Cengage, which is an online purveyor. We actually know Cengage well now. We have used it for our AP US History textbooks and also for our AP Gov textbooks. So the system looks great. They're compatible with the iPads, compatible with the laptops, compatible with the technology that we're using. There is no hard copy. We can get it, but we're going to go online, pure online, because the students are able to submit things, get feedback from the teacher in a timely fashion, so we felt that that would be best. Chris had a couple of things to say in terms of the class itself, that it really targets the concepts needed for the course, takes a look at product, price, place, and promotion, which are the 4 big things that they want to target in the sports and management course. The bundle for 30 textbooks, which is what we're asking for, you can see on your sheets, it's about $2,000, but that's for a 6-year license, so it's a pretty good deal. That's about it.
That's great.
Can I ask a quick question? It's a 6-year license, and I apologize, it only occurred to me because you said we didn't have enough students to run it the first year. Is it 6 consecutive years? So if there's a year we don't run, we're essentially wasting the license?
That's actually a great question. I can ask to engage that, or perhaps we could put the lease on pause.
Okay.
But my hope is that it will, you know, with it running the first year, that it will gain some momentum.
Absolutely, but if it ends up
run
being a
consecutive.
class we run every other year, it would be
Great
nice
question.
to know that our money is double that. Great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Does it,
So, oh, go ahead.
Does it only work with Apples? Or,
No, it works with all
well,
PCs.
You know, yeah, I'm looking at a Windows machine and I'm just thinking of the whole science curriculum thing.
No, it works for both. It's compatible with both.
Oh, it's
Great.
dirty word.
Okay, and then we'll invite Mrs. Dean to come up and join us for AP Art History. The biggest book of the night.
Oh, wow.
Do you want me to pass this around?
Yeah, we're good.
Very good.
Wait,
I thought the class was
that's the
interesting.
book we're getting?
Well,
The old edition.
The old edition.
Thanks.
It was just
It
even
doesn't-
bigger.
they don't get
No, I
smaller.
should have been older.
Right.
And paper's beautiful.
It's a masterpiece.
Got it, measures. Oh, thanks for it. Okay.
So I'll start. AP Art History has not been offered at the high school in 2 years now. 2 years. Mrs. Agatone taught it for a couple of years, and years previous to that, Mrs. Wolf had taught it. So it's something that we've been looking to bring back for a while, and Mrs. Dean was kind enough to rise to the challenge and take the plunge. So she's very excited, and we're very excited to have it back at the high school. She will be working this summer very hard on the curriculum and getting trained to course as spectacular as I know she will.
The textbook that
You gotta push the button.
The textbook that you're looking at is the text that is recommended by the College Board. I will be attending Goucher College Summer Institute Sunday for a week to learn all about the AP Art History course, and it's in the it's one of the 3 recommended texts. I also spoke with Susan Wolf on the phone, and she told me that this is the textbook to absolutely use and to make the kids read it. So she spoke very highly of this textbook. So this is the 11th edition. The textbook is now in the 15th edition, and that's why we're looking just to update it a little bit. Along with the book, I also asked for the Mindtap, which is a digital interactive version of the book. I would like a hard copy of the text. I could have gotten it digital. I posted questions on the AP board as to what are the benefits of having a digital version of the book versus the hard copy, the actual book. And
most people recommended the physical book because they said the students really like to be able to see how much content they've already gone through and what's coming ahead versus flipping through a digital version of it. But the Mindtap, my understanding is that it allows them to have a concise version of the textbook and allows them to be able to highlight, create flashcards, do interactive learning so they're not just memorizing the text, they're really engaging with the text and participating with it so that they're retaining the learning besides just learning for the text.
Jump in. The Mindtap that she's talking about is actually the same program that the Sports and Entertainment Management book uses, the APUSH and or APGov uses. So again, successful program.
Quick question. It's not related to the book, but the art history piece. Will you be taking the students to the different museums, things like that, in the class to try to attract more kids that would want to go?
Yes. My understanding is there's quite a bit of content to get through, and that the timeline of making sure you cover all of the content is pretty intense. So I would love to students to our local museums after the AP exam. Sue Wolf, who was our teacher that retired that taught the course, she's actually a docent at the Barnes Foundation, and she told me that she would be more than happy to come in and be a guest speaker. So I would love to absolutely invite Sue Wolf into the classroom and have her share her knowledge for sure.
I was thinking about a trip to Paris personally. Is there money in the budget for that?
You gotta sell a lot of candy bars.
Do we think we'll get the 20 students to run this for sure?
In fact, many students, when they found out, that Mrs. Dean will be teaching the course, were very excited and said, "Oh, I didn't know it. I would have signed up." So I don't think we'll have any trouble doing it.
All right, it's great. Can I take it?
All right, if we don't have any more questions, thank you very much. And we'll invite our middle school team up. Get started with the middle school piece. Thank you to all of our teachers for bringing their textbooks forward. They spend a long time looking at a lot of different textbooks, pricing out different options, calling different people. It's very intensive. And always give us something. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the work on the textbook versions. All right, now that brings us to.
So we're going to move on to the middle school program review, the report of the findings. And with us today we have Ms. Purnell and also Terry Canny from the Crossroads program and Clyde Deal from Guidance and Abby Daniels, who is our instructional coach this year. So they're going to be, we're going to be working together on the presentation. We'll tag team a little bit and then we'll have some time for questions. Just let us know and we will try to fill in any questions or confusion that there still might be. All right, so as you know, our district goal number 4 was to evaluate the Radner Middle School program. That was established at the beginning of this year, and the middle school hit the ground running, working on those things for this year. They've done a lot of collaborative reflections on their practices. They've done a lot of work with the full faculty, and we're going to share some of that information with you tonight. Some of the components, just to give you highlights of some of the action steps that took place throughout the study. We completed a parent survey to which we had 276 respondents. Parents were asked to respond to 2 open-ended questions. What do you think are the strengths of the middle school, and where do you think there might be areas for improvement? So contrary to what we've done in the past with long surveys with lots of different questions, this year we took the approach that we were going to put open-ended questions out there, and we were going to have our community, our stakeholders tell us what were the things that were important to them. So they were able to voice their opinions on things that maybe wouldn't have been asked on a survey, and also that we weren't kind of planting seeds about things that maybe people really didn't care that much about to begin with. So we really got the true voices of our stakeholders on the survey. After we collected all those open-ended responses, we coded them based on the different topics, and then we rank ordered them based on how frequently people responded to the different topics. And then we delved more closely into the specifics regarding the top 10 topics in each area. We did teacher, student, and parent focus groups. So Jen Campus, who works at the middle school, ran many focus groups for the teachers throughout the year around different study questions, and you saw the list of study questions that we started with. They focused on clusters of them each time they met. We met with over 200 students at the high school. We actually felt that talking to high school students about their middle school experience might give us a full perspective of not only just what was that whole 6 to 8 experience like, but how did it serve you when you moved on to the high school. So they were eager to talk to us, and we did the same thing with the same 2 open-ended questions, and then we categorized them based on the common themes. And then we also had parent focus groups. We offered them at 3 different times. We only had a turnout of about 12 people total, but very passionate, and again answered the same questions and did the same thing with the scripted responses. We had a team from the Chester County Intermediate Unit come out, and they did classroom walkthroughs. A few of the areas that emerged during the year were rigor, differentiation, standards-aligned instruction, and student engagement. So the team had 4 specific rubrics around those things, and they spent 2 days combing the school, going through different classrooms, and looking for what the overarching trends were in those 4 areas. So we not only got some specific information on those 4 areas, but we also have some baseline data that we can use when we put some of the action steps in place. We looked specifically at some subgroup data. One of the things we didn't want to do, and I know that this fall you saw the annual report on student achievement, and you heard from our principals about their building-based data. We didn't want to repeat and revisit all of that because we already have that information at our disposal. So we spent some more time looking more specifically at some of the subgroup data and how those groups were performing. There was a little mini study that was started just in the spring that Kelly Murray ran, looking at Amplify Science together with the department chair from Science. They did teacher focus groups, they did some surveys, they talked to students about Amplify Science and how Amplify Science was working, and developed some recommendations for that. We did some peer group comparisons. One of the products we have available to us now is IDEX, and IDEX allows us to select peer groups instead of saying like, well, how did we do compared to Lower Marion? It actually statistically takes schools that have similar levels of, economic disadvantaged and similar size, suburban, whatnot, and helps us to compare ourselves to schools that are similar to us that maybe we might not have heard about across the state. We did a time study which included looking at the number of minutes in a period, the number of periods in a year, the number of days in a year, the interruptions to the school days, what categories they fell in, and then also comparing ourselves time-wise to that same peer group across the state. So compared to other peer groups who we might consider ourselves compatible with, do they have more instructional time or less instructional time? And then of course we had available to us the information in the data portfolio. The process that we followed, some of the things I just described to you are in the first row in blue. We're going to be talking tonight about findings and then recommendations and action plans. So our plan at this point is in pulling everything together for today, we realized in having more conversations with the group that it would make more sense for us to spend some more time kind of putting the polish on some of the action plans before we brought the recommendations forward. So we've actually scheduled several days to work this summer. We have a team from the middle school, eight or nine teachers, and then some administrators who are going to be pulling those parts together. So tonight we're going to focus on findings. In August, when our teachers come back, we're going to share with them the action plans and the recommendations that we develop over the summer. And then once they have an opportunity to give some input on them and we can perfect them with those help, then we'll be bringing those back to you in September so you can take a look at that. This in no way means that we can't start things in September. And as a matter of fact, we have quite a laundry list of things that the middle school addressed along the way. When things came up, if there was a way for them to put some things in place and address issues, there are several of those I'll share with you tonight, and there are many of those that we'll be addressing next year as well. Just to give you a couple highlights of those types of things, some peeks into the parent survey. When we asked parents, the 3 things that they were most excited about, the teaching staff, they had many, many positive things. Child-centered, excellent, cares about our children, get to know our children, easy to get in touch with, responsive. The physical plan, which I would never have put a question about how do you like the building on a survey, but we had many of our families respond and say, we love the building, we love the fact that it's in Wayne, we love the fact that middle school students can walk down and buy a slice of pizza, very important. And then also the unique programs. People made positive comments about accelerated classes, integrated classes, many of the different opportunities with like the anti-bullying programs, the mentorship programs, all those types of things were mentioned. And actually I have to mention in the negative, I guess you would call it negative, areas for improvement, the third most popular response from our survey people was none, that they didn't have an example of anything they would suggest to improve. So it's just as important, I think, with these open-ended questions to look at what people said and also to look at what they chose not to mention. Safe and caring place. We didn't hear parents mentioning things like, you know, my child doesn't feel safe at school, or they're exposed to, you know, drugs or alcohol, or, you know, those types of things just did not come up when we asked them these two specific questions. On the right side, you'll see kind of the short list of some of the things that Ms. Purnell and her team have already addressed this year. Significantly reducing religious exemptions. Their building came up with a plan to put in place, and they did a great job this year reducing the number of students who weren't participating in the state testing. They've taken some steps to reduce the time it takes for standardized testing, and then of course our state helped us as well by reducing the testing time. Improving the PSSA testing schedule so that it doesn't have quite the impact on instruction that it's had in the past. They have new staff and student orientation they're going to be putting in place next year, and also piloted a process for aligning the curriculum for both rigor and alignment to student engagement. All right, so we're going to talk about the specific areas of the study and the findings in 3 areas. The first one is academic excellence, and we'll start with
Good evening. Before I start, I just want to make sure everyone's aware on our slides what we have on the left is the finding, and on the right is a summary of the information that we received from either the parent focus groups, the surveys, student focus groups, teachers, and data that we have. So that will be indicated there. Using the information that we received from all of these different groups, this first finding relates to curriculum. And you'll see that these first 3 are all very connected. They all relate to academic excellence. And some of the information that you see as the supports are similar or the same. So that's because they are referencing more than one area of academic excellence. The first finding references the inconsistencies that both students and parents have noticed between the different levels, different grades, and different programs. And leveling, we're talking about grade level versus accelerated. When we talk about programming, we might be looking at your traditional programming compared to integrated, and then of course from 6th to 7th and 7th to 8th. And they were receiving very different experiences. They were noticing different experiences that one student might be receiving on a team versus what another student would be receiving on another team. Data also reported, and this was from the walkthrough groups, that there was a need for professional development. They recommended that there was some professional development around the use of using standards to inform instruction better in the classroom. So our finding then is the need to ensure that standards alignment in the curricular areas reflects a challenge for all students, so that we see some more consistencies across those grade levels, teams, and programs. I think it's important to note that our curriculum is currently aligned to the standards, but it's looking at how we can maybe more closely or sharpen that alignment. Our curriculum currently, we have several standards listed in our units, and we're looking to sort of hone them down to specifically the standards that we're going to be formatively or summatively assessing within those units, as opposed to just ones that might be touched on. And that will allow some more consistency between those different team teachers, the programs, and from one grade to the next.
Thank you. So as Abby was just describing what's being learned, the second finding is more about how it's being learned. what methods are being used in classrooms, in different programs, and students there, even if they were learning at the same level or the same topics, found that students on other teams were perhaps engaging in more project-based learning, or some were doing research projects and others were not. Things that were happening in integrated classrooms weren't necessarily also happening out in other classrooms. And both parents and students indicated that they would like that to kind of have a little bit more equity to it. The data report, so that's why you see the first two things are the same. The first two supports for finding one and finding two are the same because it goes hand in hand. What else goes with instruction, though, is the need, some teachers would say, okay, fine, we'd be happy to do that, but we need some more professional development in that. We need to be working on some differentiation skills and so forth that we thought were taken care of by leveling. Finding two, then, is to ensure that the instruction reflects rigor, differentiation, and student engagement for all students. There it is. For all students across all areas.
And finding three moves into information about our encore or elective courses. And I would call them more encore at the middle school because there's not a lot of election in the courses because we do an exposure experience more so than an elective experience. And that's noted in some of the findings that we hear from the parents and the students. They'd like more opportunity for choice. With my intensive work with the 339 plan and the career educational work over the past 18 months, I think that fits very nicely into the direction that we really want to go with career guidance and our work with the students and trying to give them some more choice like that. Maybe looking at sort of a pathways approach to the middle school electives or encores, where we're still talking about music and art and tech ed and facts, but maybe looking more at a pathway where you select one of those. Everyone has to select at least one course from one of those, but then you have more choice to focus in on something that you really have a passion for, which speaks to the finding by the students, they report by the students, they want to have more connection and real world connection. So again, starting to look at some courses that may offer that greater connection, not just simply all the traditional programs that we have, but trying to help them focus in a little bit more on real world and current world kinds of standards. For the parents, they talk about an alignment concern related to these courses, moving from middle school to high school. I heard the Spanish teachers talking tonight about that same exact question and beginning to look at that. I do believe that's more of a vertical team question that we have to continue to look at with all of our coursework, and hearing that that's a concern, we certainly want to address that probably through a vertical team for the encore courses.
Okay, the next section is about organizational structure and processes, and Jen Campus, who's going to present this tonight, she can't be here, so I'm going to walk you through it. Finding number 4 really talks about time and maximizing the use of time for instructional purposes. And as I mentioned before, we looked at things like days in the year, times instructional minutes, and the use of various times, like the extended learning time, how it's being used by different people, whether or not it's similar or as effective across the board. So this finding is really going to address that specific look at everything from how standardized testing impacts the instructional day to, have we truly defined the way the extended learning time fits into the core curriculum. The second one, finding number 5, and this one I'm going to read to you because I think that helps with the clarity. There is a need to ensure that all middle school staff members are positioned as stakeholders and contributors to a process of continual improvement. Our middle school teachers, through the discussions, felt like they would like to play a larger part in establishing the future of their middle school. They want to have more people involved in more of the components of the study finding, which is another reason why it's appropriate for us to take a pause right here and spend some time this summer getting some more involvement. Not every teacher is as available during the year. We get to things like sub-coverage and all those types of things. Sometimes it's a little easier to grab the instructional coach and guidance counselor than it is to pull an English teacher out of the classroom. So the rest of the staff really does want to be involved and want to see these teams more more balanced and more representative of the total staff. So this pause that we'll be taking this summer to work on these action plans will really help us to begin to address that piece. All right, and then Ms. Purnell's going to talk about the last piece.
Thank you. I apologize. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I also want to thank the team that were able to come tonight and those who had also worked so diligently but were unable to make it tonight. I'm really proud of the work that we've done this past year. I feel like that it's bringing us together as a school and as a team to really look at those two key areas, and that is, what is it that we're doing that we should maintain or improve, and where can we grow, and what were the suggestions or enhancements that we can make towards improvement. So it's been eye-opening. We do have more work that we need to do. But at least we have that openness and that collaboration where we're ready to dig in and get some of those things done. For finding number 6, this one is particularly related to our discipline protocol and the processes that we use. We do have our student and parent handbook, our staff resource book that we use, and our discipline matrix, but we need to refine and fine-tune some of the procedures that we already have in place so that those inconsistencies amongst all the stakeholders and what they are seeing is minimized. And then you will note that some of our discipline referrals are really down. That was a good number. We are speculating or have looked and begun to look at why such a drastic jump, and we do have an idea of where some of those areas are, which also goes along with what Dr. McQuiggan was saying about we're noticing things, and just slowing things down we've agreed is going to allow us to really look at some of those intricacies and some of those particulars that we think are impacting us. So it's great we're moving in the right direction, even with our serious incident reports. There aren't really that many. We've only had 2 or 3 this year, which is really great. Finding number 7, which really deals with communication. And what we realized is that we have a dozen or more ways that we are communicating with all of our stakeholders. And what's happening is that we're doing a lot of communicating, but a lot of those things are missing each other. So depending on the stakeholder group that you're speaking with, we may have 4 things targeted towards, let's say, our sports, or towards clubs or intramural groups, and we may have 6 or 7 things listed and ways that we feel that we're communicating, but then you have your parents or your students who say, I didn't know anything about that. So once we listed the 12 or more ways that we were communicating, it was sort of a joke. We were like, oh my goodness, but look at all the ways that we're communicating. But if they're not all talking to each other, then it hasn't been as effective and successful as we thought it would be. So we're working on all of our communicative measures. We know that never goes away, but we're going to refine that and look at some of those areas where there's disparity in the way we are sharing information.
So as I mentioned before, our future timeline, we have dates and a team identified for June, July, and August, action planning work group times. In August, we'll be taking those action plans and recommendations back to the faculty of the middle school. And then in September, we'll be coming back here to share those with you as well. One of the things to note is that when we come back with the action plans and the recommendations, we'll have an opportunity to share some more of the background data that was collected as well. So we feel it's going to be a lot more meaningful when we see those 2 pieces connected together. You know, here's what we found out, and here's what we're going to do about it. So you can look forward to that as well in August or September. Anybody have any questions?
Oh, you
First of all, thank you so much. The means of presentation was very useful. I really liked the format, but I also really appreciated that you didn't just read it to us, you came and explained it, because I had some questions as I read it. What does this mean? And I think you all did a wonderful job at presenting a more fulsome view, and this was a great introduction in our board package. I appreciate that. I guess I had a number of questions. And you answered a bunch of them, so that's I was just checking because I ticked them off as we went. So finding number 1, I guess I want to just make sure I understand this. The concept is really that between 2 teams, let's say team A and B, obviously I have a student in an integrated program this year, so I don't remember the colors. But like between team A and B, the complaint is that maybe A and B learned language arts the same, but C didn't do as many projects and had a different, so 1 and 2, the issue is A, the students may have been held to a different standard, but B, the type of instruction was different. And so you're trying to find ways to, even though the teachers are different, even out the teaching and the learning between the teams so the parents don't feel like their kids are on the remedial team.
Right, and so really for finding 1, what we're looking at is more alignment to standards, right? Making sure that the standards we're hitting are really the standards that are needed and everybody's hitting those standards, okay? Finding 2 was more to the second part, how are the standards being learned? What's going on in the classroom? So I think it's kind of twofold, like, you know, what's going on there, they're learning something different in there, may not actually be reality, but if we have everything kind of more aligned to standards, so we want to avoid Stepford teachers. Right? So we're hoping that by looking at 1 and 2, we can do that.
Okay. And I guess when you were looking at all of these things, were there specific courses people were concerned about? Was it specific programs or specific electives, or was it just generally
Part of it was specific courses, but the other part was particularly feedback from our students. Like, I've learned a lot of things that I already knew. So that's where kind of the curriculum alignment and number 2 come together with the rigor and the differentiation. So, you know, making sure, as Abby was mentioning, that we're using formative assessments or pre-assessments so that students, no matter where they are constantly moving up to the next level. Rather than, you know, a concentration on full group instruction where the information might be new to 20% of the students and old news to 80% of the students. So I think it was both of those things. But even when, you know, we heard feedback from parents about, you know, the integrated programs, or even from students about the integrated programs, the piece we really tried to get to was, what was it about the integrated program that you loved? Like, you know, because students openly admitted, they said, you know, we don't all want to be in an integrated program, it's not for everyone, even the students who were in it. You know, I would never force people to be in it or whatever. But when we talked to them about the things that they really cared about, it was how they learned time management, how they learned to work as a group, how they had choice, how they did project-based learning. You know, those are components of high-quality instruction that could happen anywhere. So that's really the piece we're trying to tease out.
Okay. I got the time. I had a question I wanted to understand a little bit better about the staff feeling like they weren't involved as stakeholders. When you say there's a reference to committee memberships lacking diversity across teams, grades, is that committees within the panel that reviewed the program, or is there some other set of committees? Which one are you on? I'm sorry, finding number 5, teachers reported that.
No, thank you.
I don't know how many committees we have within the building. There's several, and some are current, some sort of, they go away for a little while and come back. We do have a list of the committees and who the faculty members are on each committee. But when you look, you see a lot of the same faculty members on these committees, and I think what teachers are saying is that they would like to see a larger group of teachers represented in these committees. It's not this particular committee, because I think we've done a really good job with this one, including a lot of teachers. But some of the ones that we already have established, so maybe going back and looking to see who's currently a member of that committee, do they want to remain, or maybe give their seat up to someone else, or maybe we can just add people to already existing committees so that there's more voice represented with each one.
Can I just jump in? Because I don't want to forget this comment. When you used the word diversity, did you mean variety? Because I hear diversity as minorities, and I wonder if what you meant is that you lack variety.
I would say variety. I think we're looking at different subject areas being represented, so different variety. Grade levels, right.
Not diversity generally means minorities or not, and I don't think you meant that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
No,
so sorry.
Because that was my next question.
Got it.
Okay, so this isn't so much specifically the middle school program review. We need to review. This is how teachers feel about the middle school program and how involved they are or are not.
Right, and that was one of our research questions. That was one of the questions from the initial study.
Okay.
So, you know, in the end, we didn't have a finding for it, but it definitely was the undercurrent of conversations throughout all the different pieces that we looked at.
Okay. So I guess then the question is, because I was kind of conflating that with this program, are you planning in August during the teacher and service days to roll out some of these findings and recommendations to the teachers first to get their buy-in before you?
Yeah,
okay. So that's some of it. The committees are a separate piece.
And they
Okay.
already have the findings.
Okay, right, no, you have the findings, I mean the recommendations and
Yeah,
kind of
right.
corrections. So I guess you said the one thing, Maureen, that kind of struck me at the beginning, because anecdotally I get an earful about different things people are unhappy with at the middle school, and that's fine, because I know a lot of middle school parents. But my question for you, you said that when, like, the third thing that they would improve on was done. So what were the two main issues that people saw for improvement?
First one was communication. And, oh no, I'm sorry, the first one was access to integrated programs, the transparency around the lottery, and the second one was communication.
Okay.
Is that right?
There was no third one?
The what?
And there was no third one?
The third one was none.
So you didn't get feedback on the social issues around the
Oh, no, it
lunchroom?
goes, we have 12.
Okay.
We have 12 findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, because I have a list here.
That was it, we just fixed those two
Wasn't
things, we're good.
Wasn't only, yeah, okay.
No, there were many items, but, you know, again, the idea was to code them and rank them, yeah. So we had, I think we had 12. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate it. The one thing I would mention, because I do think that for the most part, the middle school is a good environment and a healthy place. But I've been in a number of different settings where I've heard students mention the social difficulties of the lunchroom. And they attribute it, whether or not it's true, to the fact that there are a certain number of seats at the table. And I will just say, I hear it from the kids, not necessarily just their parents. So
It did, the round tables versus the long tables, and the fact that they're round seats instead of a long
so there are
bench.
only so many seats at the table, and if your friend group is more than that, one of you doesn't get to join the group or stands behind the group, or is no longer welcome at the table.
They pull a stool over from there.
Some of them do.
Wow. But yes, that did come up.
Okay.
I think three relatively short questions. I was curious what made you specifically decide to include Amplify Science in the program review component. So on the first slide, or it's, I guess page 3 on your slide, you know, it all seems very broad, that you wanted to look at lots of broad things there. So what was it that kind of specifically had you single out Amplify Science?
Well, it wasn't initially included as part of the study, but it bubbled up as a concern during the year, and it just seemed appropriate to blend it in with the rest of this information. Because some of what, and you'll see, like when we've had conversations with the team, some of what you hear about differentiation and hands-on instruction and all those types of things really parallel the struggles that we identified with Amplify. So although it might seem like we're just calling out one program, it was a program that has been called out by various people, but it just makes sense to put it here because the fixes per se definitely will align with the findings that you heard tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. And let me just back up for a second, but to say thank you for not reading these slides. Really appreciated the background and the filling in of information. This is a nice, what you had to say was a nice compliment to what I could read ahead of time and read as you were speaking, so thank you about that. Finding number 1, I understand that we want to align to standards in making sure that, curriculum is aligned to standards. But when I hear the first one about experiences and expectations of rigor vary from team to team, what I thought I heard said, but I don't think you mean this, so I just want to clarify. To Sarah's point, if team M, N, and P, and I'm using team letters that I know we don't have. If the rep on the street is that team M is the great team because the teachers are the best, or courses, the way they run their classroom, if that's kind of the reputation on the street, and I don't think that anybody should kid themselves. Teams have reputations, and kids know it, and parents know it. So, if team M has the reputation as the best team, however you define best, and it turns out that team M is runs its team above the standards of alignment. I really hope that we don't lower the standards of alignment for Team M so that it's aligned with N and P. I know that I think that what you're meaning to say is that you want to find out where are the inconsistencies and bring everyone up, not push a team that's doing a fabulous job down. And I don't think that you meant that at all, but when you say align it to the standards, it's quite possible that some of our teams are performing well beyond what the state and national standards are. And I don't think you meant it that way, and I just wanted to clarify that.
We definitely did not mean it that way.
I didn't think so.
Maureen mentioned the process we looked at for writing curriculum, and one of the things that we noticed is that we do have, as a high achieving school, we have a lot of kids entering the grade level, and they're already very close at or sometimes above the grade level standards. Our curriculum right now is written to the grade level standards, even the accelerated. So for a teacher who is following the curriculum, they're using grade level standards with students who might be ready for the next or maybe 2 or 3 grade levels above. So this new process that we're looking at is looking to see how we can work that differentiation into the document itself so that all teachers, not just the teacher on Team M, knows how he or she can differentiate and enrich that environment for the kids who are either above, at, or maybe even below the grade level standards.
Okay, thank you. So then
Can I jump in
sure,
one thing?
Of course.
And also I think was part of the discussions, I mean, if we have teachers, the scenario you just gave where Team M is really doing a wonderful job, well, it's time for us to open up what's going on in Team M.
Exactly.
And to share that with the other teams. It's time for us to have that collaboration, that discussion. Right. And that's some of the discussion that I've heard the teachers share. Those opportunities for that sharing to take place.
Right, Ken, actually that perfectly dovetails with finding number 5. I want to tell you, I really appreciate the entire team being really honest with us and saying, we're not going to make recommendations now, because one of the things we've learned is that our teachers are really interested in being a part of the solution, and this district values our teachers and we want you to be part of the solution. I am perfectly, I'll speak for myself, I am happy to wait for your responses and your recommendations if what that means is that our professionals are saying to you, we want to be part of this, we want to share what we found on Team M to say what you're saying. So thank you for that. You know, meeting a deadline for us just to give us an answer, I'm glad you guys went the route you went. Which brings me to my last question, which is on the future timeline, I'm slightly concerned that, are you going to be bringing more information back to the curriculum committee? Or I'm a little bit concerned that in sharing the recommendations and the action plans at the September meeting, after it's already been shared with the teachers, I wouldn't want the teachers or the district to be in a position where if for some reason there's something that this board doesn't get behind. I don't think that'll be the case, but I'm just a little bit concerned about, not cart before the horse, because I respect the teachers and you guys are the boots on the ground, but just if there was something to come from the recommendations that for whatever reason, you know, the district, the board had concerns about, and yet you've already worked out and I think you mean perfect action plans, not perfect action plans. I do know you mean that as perfect. Yeah, but both. You know, yeah, exactly. Perfect the perfect action plans. That's my only feedback of this whole thing is that that would be an unfortunate circumstance. But maybe there'll be a way for the team to communicate with the board in a fashion that makes sense, just to make sure that we all stay aligned on what you're trying to do. Those are my, thank you, and thank you all for this.
Are there other? I have some questions. On that note, that was actually my last question.
I'm anxious about your action plan being actionable for next school year. Is that going to happen? Because I hate to lose another whole year because we wanted to wait 1 month.
No, and I don't see that happening. I mean, I think a perfect example is the number of things that the middle school's already addressed as part of the process of doing the study. I think we have a pretty good idea already of the direction that we're going to be going in, and we have been sort of setting things up and aligning them. So, you know, Abby's already written some model units that she can share with teachers, and you know, there are a lot of pieces already falling into place. I think it's actually going to align quite nicely with our budgeting process. If we have budget implications, we'll be putting those on the table before November. We really didn't have the opportunity to put any budget recommendations on the table if we were to put them in place now, because you know we're pretty much finished with the budget from last year. But it will align again with the budgeting process, and again, some of those things that are that might have financial implications will obviously have to wait. But there are plenty of ideas and plenty of you know, excitement and passion around making improvements that we can start the first day of school and work on all year.
Great, good to hear it. The number and type of discipline referrals that were drastically down. I don't remember the 8th graders being particularly naughty last year. That's quite a drop. What do you think? What happened? It's in the good direction, but.
One of the areas that we looked at was a system that was put in place with our student incident reporting. So it's the way that it's being reported. We've actually added another step. So rather than our teachers or staff going right to a discipline referral, a system that we have been looking at is where I would say it's more collaborative. So for example, we saw a few students today, whereas the teacher may have previously written the students up, it gave the counselors and I, as administrator, to sit down, talk with the students, get their reports, what happened, who were the witnesses, who was involved, and then to bullet or highlight what the incident was about, which allowed the counselor and I to then talk about some of those steps. And what we already know, where a lot of those things overlap is where really the truth lies. That's the commonality. So whereas that particular process itself has allowed us in the 3 grade levels, rather than a lot of referrals being written, it's allowing more of, I would say, restorative practices where there's conversation and there's follow-up. There are parents who are now saying, you know, I want my Johnny in the room with Sally. They're not getting along. Which is an uptick in because of social media. So a lot of things may happen on the weekends or at home, but we can't say, that happened at your address, forget it, we're not dealing with it here, we have to deal with it in school. So that's just one of the areas that we have begun to look at. Our initial look, that we feel that piece, I didn't realize the power of it until a few days ago when I kept saying, what is it, that's beautiful. We knew it had gone down, and they have been going down, so we think it's around the reporting, and we're hoping that it has to do with that additional piece that we're sort of using more often, which is the student incident reporting. It could be parents, it could be staff, and it's creating more conversations around the particular incident, and not necessarily level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, here's the detention, here are those things. The conversation took place, but we believe that that may be one of the major components that's leading towards the drop. So just as that example, we need to look at it some more. In-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, after-school detentions, morning detentions, administrative conferences, all those things are listed already in our student parent handbook.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment. It's fantastic, really. And then just one last question. I know we're talking about grade 7 has the world language choices. And I happened to see the form, I think it was this week, or was it last week? And I was very surprised to see you had a list of 4 choices, which to me wasn't really a choice. You could get stuck with language number 4. Is that happening? Was that just put there in a worst case scenario? What's going on?
Yeah, I can speak to this past year. We had only one student who we got to their 4th choice, and it was a very exceptional reason for that. But most of them, I'd say 95% of students get 1st or 2nd choice. Okay. And I would say a very high percentage get their 1st choice. Some of that has to do with oversubscription in particular languages if we have limited number of teachers.
I get that. I just hate to think that we're limiting choices, and really language is a lifelong decision. You know, sorry, we didn't have an extra X teacher. I guess there's not that much flexibility. I appreciate how we plan ahead with our language skills by teacher. Wow, that's a shame. What if you don't get your first choice and it really means a lot to you? Do you have to start over again in 9th grade? Is that the only option? You're not 9th grade teachers, I shouldn't be asking you, but is that what happens? Anyone?
It could. Yeah. I mean, that could happen for students.
You're not like.
That could happen for students, but again, you know, they do the survey in 6th grade, and the idea is for them, of course, to figure out where they have, you know, their passion. But you know, as you said, you are limited by the number of people. I mean, sometimes we'll have a teacher that teaches more than one language, but that's not typically the commonplace.
One of the other pieces, the students who commonly do not get their first choice have turned their phone in beyond the deadline. And so there's a consequence for that.
Shame on them.
There's a tip. Tip of the day.
I'll call someone right now. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I had a question, actually just a comment about the reduced religious exemptions. I guess you're aware that there is another exemption potentially coming your way, that's the philosophical opt-out that's passed out of the House. So I was just glad, I just wanted to see if you're aware of that, because you could be going through round 2 of that if that becomes law. Another question I had is about this that the grade 8 electives are limited to 2, because in the student handbook, there would seem to be a number of them, so I was confused what the 2 are. It lists art, technology, education, computers, robotics and automation, facts, vocal music, music technology, debate.
Yeah, so that's really, they get 2 choices. They choose from 7 or 8, but they only get 2.
So I only have 2 slots.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and if you expand the electives choices, I mean, that would be a pretty significant shift in how you run the program, right? Because you need to have more teachers and more time, and that's a big shift to include more electives.
Or some districts have, you know, redefined what, you know, their electives mean. There are districts who have, you know, decided that they were going to have a STEM focus in all of their electives. So they have STEM, family and consumer science, and, you know, those types of things. So that, you know, there are things you can do within the current offerings, but certainly the hope would be to offer more choice and to, you know, kind of modernize some of the offerings as well. And that includes world language. I mean, we did get a lot of feedback on world language and the alignment with the high school, so that'll be another piece as well.
And I guess my final question is jumping ahead to when the recommendations are made and the action steps are finalized, and that is, I guess through this process, you accumulated something that would serve as baseline data. So do you have a plan for when to evaluate any action plans and recommendations that you implement to see if in fact they worked, and what does that look like it would be at this point?
We'll be structuring the goals and the recommendations in the same fashion that we did with the technology study, just to keep things consistent. So, you know, you'll see the action step, the baseline data, the timeline, and, you know, some of these projects are going to be 2 and 3 years. And some of them are quick overnight fixes, and some of them, you know, we've already picked some of the low-hanging fruit, but you know, some of these institutional changes will take quite a bit of time.
And I guess when you narrow down the communication system, the challenge in that is you're going to need to communicate that the communication has gotten streamlined, right? So is that going to be part of the action plan for that? And
yeah, I mean, that's, you know, that's the big piece. And, you know, we do so much, and we looked at a lot of this when, you know, students said, like, I didn't know about the clubs, and I didn't know how to join a club, and I didn't know when the club met, and, you know, we can identify 100 different digital ways that students could understand. But then we said, well, maybe it's time we need to go back to doing some talking. You know, maybe we need to have, you know, a hands-on session where people hear from club sponsors, or have a chance to actually sign a clipboard and join something. So, you know, we do have a lot of great digital communication tools, but, you know, we do work with human beings, so some pieces of it have to be very human too.
what is that thing, I remember Mr. Deal told me midway through our middle school experience about something, what was that screen called, in the cafeteria?
Oh.
Yeah, there's a television screen that runs a daily script of all the clubs and all the activities.
What is that called again?
Student bulletin.
The student bulletin.
Yes, and it's available not only on that screen, but it's available on the middle school website as well.
Okay.
But yes, it's there.
Okay, right, I remember that was just kind of an interesting revelation halfway through the middle school cycle of, what is that thing again? Okay, and I guess that's really it, but thank you for the comprehensive review, and it'll be exciting to see what comes of it.
I just have a couple of things. I guess the first one, and before I get to you guys, the first one will be for Dr. McGuigan here, because if you could repeat the, I don't like to use the word complaints, but the issues that were brought forward. I thought you said something about integrated programs was something that the parents came up with that they'd like to see more of. Is that, did I hear that?
It was transparency around the process of being identified for an integrated program, the lottery.
Okay, because I believe that we should look in expanding these. And I know they're not for everybody, but I think the future of education, which when I went to teacher school, they actually brought in two teachers, one of the teachers from Radner to Rosemont to explain to us the value of progressive education and what was being delivered in Radner, which was 20 years ago. Right? We haven't changed that piece a whole lot, but I think we need to begin to look into expanding that and allowing more of our kids to obtain some of those things that the other students are gaining differently. Okay? Because I can see that as something that we can look at. And I'm not saying to look at it right away, because I understand there are cost implications and different things like that. But that's a learning strategy that is out there. We've almost perfected it, if I could take the liberty of saying that. We've done an extremely good job with that. That we really have. My son was in the first one. He was an alumni of the Watershed program, the first one that they had.
He beat me in the lottery.
And he beat Mike in the lottery. So I would say that could be one that.
I'm not calling Chuck old because his son and I graduated.
Yeah. Well,
And all of those components are important to look at, and as we delve down into the different pieces, there were undeniably many strengths, but there were also some concerns as well. So as with any program, we have anywhere, and any program that parents gave us feedback on at the middle school, there was both positive and negative, and I think we need to look at both of those things.
I would agree, and I think we do need to look at that. That's really what my point is, because we've been kind of not quite, we've been static on some of that. And I think we need to begin to move a little bit more aggressively to see what some of the benefits are. And if those programs are benefiting in a different way, but in a more positive way, because I've had many people say it would be great if more of the students can get in. Because what's the population of the grade level? You got 300 or something like that? About 300, and how many get into that program? 40. So it's a little bit more than 10%, but 12%. So I think that's something that we can look into the future as we move ahead. And I would just like to thank all of you, as everybody else does, for looking into this and moving in a positive direction. Because I did attend a program that was put on by our superintendent, was part of the panel discussion 64 years after Brown, I think it was. And that came up with a discipline inadequacy, not even inequalities that we were tasked by the group there to look at, and I'm glad to see that we're doing that. And that kind of brings me to the mindfulness question that was there. That's what can do an enormous amount for your discipline is, why am I doing these things? What am I part of? And I think that would be a good suggestion. Because I know we have trained a lot of our teachers on mindfulness, so and I think that's something that what do you call that? Restorative practices.
That's only because a few of us have been trained, Thank you, Mr. Deal. A few of us have been trained. I know a few years ago we went to Bethlehem. Ms. McMenamin, Mr. Deal, and myself, we had gone to one of the trainings. I think my background is a former emotional support teacher, so those things automatically, I can't pretend it's not there. And so it comes out in those ways and some of the way that we handle the discipline. So we're just trying to align that. Our administrative team, we're realigning some of the things just to try to address some of our strengths and kind of reshuffle some things in that way as well to bring some of those strengths forward. I actually love doing it. I don't always have the time to really do it, but I feel like that we can make those adjustments.
We can be proud of that because that's a good, we're moving in the right direction by knowing that. So I'm very proud to be sitting here listening to all the accomplishments that I believe that you guys have put forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lydia, just a quick remark. I just want to support what you just said, Chuck. I'm a wholehearted advocate for those programs to be available for as many Radner kids as want to be part of those programs. So, thank you. Thanks.
All right. I want to also sincerely thank all of you. I know I saw a tremendous amount of work that went into this, and we are so grateful. And again, I have to say what we told Ms. Purnell, Dr. Purnell, back in, when did we first talk about this? That just your spirit of being willing to look at it. It's just really refreshing, and we appreciate that. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to new business. Is there any new business? And unfortunately, I think due to the time, we're going to have to truncate our last public comment, but we will meet again in August. Thank you, everyone.
I'm very happy.